What is up, everybody? I'm NoLuxGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to be looking at a bunch of games. Currently, I've got 12 games for you, so 10 games plus 2 bonus ones, or maybe I'll cut some if I don't love them. But I think these games showcase a variety of different things that this Dracula discard deck can do, because it is a very, very powerful and very consistent deck. One of the locations that it can take advantage of is Onslaught Citadel, as we see in this one. I'm Spider-Man emoting there because I noticed that my opponent has the same avatar, the new Apocalypse $100 avatar that I bought last week. And Muir Island we did see in my video yesterday, but that's always a good one with Lockjaw. Some of these are going to be like precursor to those games that we showcased yesterday where I got Infinite. If you haven't seen that already, go check that out, as well as Saturday's video. Those were all of the games from when I hit 99 to when I hit Infinite, and all of these games that we're going to look at today are going to be from 90 until 99. So some of those other ones along the climb. I'm going to go ahead and snap on turn 4 here with Colleen Wing, discarding a pair of swarms. We got a pretty great draw there off of a Tillon, drawing both Swarm and Apocalypse. So we're going to be able to discard some cards pretty nicely throughout the rest of the game. And looks like we're battling pretty well to win Muir Island, as well as the swarms helping us win the other locations with the big Apocalypse here too. One thing that's kind of interesting, I believe, on this one is because we are going to have so many swarms from all of these discards, I'm going to play one of my swarms right now, just because we don't actually need that many more, and we're going to be filling all of these locations basically regardless here. And we're also going to be filling some of these locations. Well, let's talk about all this stuff first. Moon Knight discards Ironheart. We punish my opponent for not just playing that card out right away. And then Blade's going to discard, even more swarms. So I was pretty right to think that we were probably going to be discarding a ton of swarms this turn. And then we grab America Chavez, and my opponent's going to Magic. So we even have a 7th turn this game, and this one is definitely going to stretch on a bit. We'll play out Hell Cow this turn, and I'm going to drop some more swarms even so, because I don't want to just discard 2 swarms. I want to make sure that we discard the Apocalypse here and get to grow that as well. And one thing, if you don't already know this, Hell Cow it won't hit the same swarms that it generates from discarding swarms, if that makes sense. It's only going to be able to discard cards that were in your hand when you played the Hell Cow. So hopefully that makes sense. But we'll finish this game off by dropping Apocalypse and Swarm. My opponent's going to get to drop a bunch of stuff this turn too, because they've got their cards costing 2 less because of Sarah, and they've flipped some cards with Mr. Negative. So they could definitely add some really strong power to the board, but I think that we've got it because Apocalypse is just so much power, and it's also going to be tough for them to come back from being 30 behind in Muir Island. So I'm feeling pretty decent about our chances in this one nonetheless. Let's see what my opponent comes up with, or if they just wind up retreating in just a moment. Drum roll, please. I mean, this deck can definitely make a lot of power. A flipped Iron Man could just win a location, but my opponent is going to wind up retreating. They don't have it, or they weren't feeling confident enough. Like I said, we're going to take a look at a bunch of different videos that hopefully all kind of have some interesting things to talk about. I kind of combed through them, and I think that they do. And this one, we're going to talk about Project Pegasus, which is a cool location, but it's actually just a terrible location for the discard deck. Now, in this scenario, we can actually play the Moon Knight, but a lot of times when I see Project Pegasus and I'm playing Apocalypse or Dracula, I just fully skip on the full turn. I just don't have anything to do with that extra 5 energy early on, so it can definitely be a little bit awkward. But this time we're going to try to potentially use Moon Knight to discard Apocalypse. My opponent, as we see, is going to take much bigger advantage of this location. We do get their She-Hulk, so that's kind of cool. They were saving some energy to make use of that, but they were planning on using their energy. They go Bucky Barnes, Mysterio, and Carnage to add 12 power to the Project Pegasus location. So not looking great for us, but the one thing that's kind of cool is now, because we've got nothing in our hand, all of our discard spells are going to be guaranteed to hit Apocalypse, even though we lost that blade last turn. So that part's kind of cute. We'll start to build Apocalypse up here, and hopefully we can do something with that in these later turns of the game. But it's going to feel slow as we just draw our cards one at a time here. Now we're going to play Lockjaw, but I don't have anything left to play into Lockjaw, so just ultimately pretty awkward stuff. And I play Lockjaw into the Project Pegasus location just so that way I don't clog up any of the other locations. And then we get another Project Pegasus. So this one was pretty silly. If you missed that, the what's it called? Mirror Dimension, but it hits another Project Pegasus, transforms on turn 4, so pretty silly stuff. We are going to wind up dropping a Swordmaster into that Lockjaw location and discarding Apocalypse a few more times. I do debate, like, do I just want to play Apocalypse here? And I could see doing so. That would allow me to play Chavez on the final turn, but I think we're just best off if we hold on to the Apocalypse. I think about it a few more times, but ultimately I'm going to wind up bringing that Apocalypse back, and that's why I say that Project Pegasus is such an awkward location for this deck, because we can never use the extra energy from it. My opponent uses Arrow to make us move that Swordmaster into the sewer system. It's a little bit not great for us, but that'll pump up our Apocalypse nonetheless, and then Wave means we only get to play one thing this turn. So, not a super exciting turn, but I'll throw the Swarm into the Lockjaw, and that'll flip into, hopefully, some more discard spells, so that way Morbius outpaces Arrow, and Apocalypse hopefully can just steal the Project Pegasus location for us on the last turn. We'd really like to hit America Chavez into the Lockjaw location. That would allow us to hit even more discards, so that could be cool, though. Dracula, also pretty cool, because now we're battling for Project Pegasus. So now we just throw Chavez into the other Project Pegasus location, and now we're battling for all 3 locations. And despite this looking like it wasn't going to be a super great game, and looking like it wasn't going to be a super powerful game for us, with that death play by my opponent, we actually get a cosmic victory and win all 3 lanes just barely, 25-24, 12-11, and 12-7. A really, really close one, all things considered, but a cosmic victory is pretty sweet, especially in a game where the locations were just so poor for us. But just don't play into the Project Pegasus hype. Hold on to your cards and you'll be able to find a victory. Another Bar Sinister game. Bar Sinister, like I mentioned yesterday, actually a pretty cool location for this deck. So we'll take a look at that in this one. My opponent going to lead with a Nightcrawler into Bar Sinister, which is always a sweet card to throw there. I gave them the thumbs up because Bar Sinister wasn't the featured location at the time. So my opponent just had a cool play, not really knowing what was going on. And then there's that dang Project Pegasus again. Though this time we're a little bit better equipped to deal with it, because we can throw Dracula into Bar Sinister, and then we can just morb into one of the other lanes. The only thing I'm thinking here is, do I want to morb into the open lane, or do I want to morb into the undiscovered lane right now? And then I'm also going to go ahead and snap, because I'm feeling pretty confident about this. We saw what this did yesterday, and I'm feeling like it could maybe do some similar things, even though that one hasn't happened yet. But look at what happens here. My opponent has a Professor X into Bar Sinister. If you're not familiar with how Professor works into Bar Sinister, Well, turns out neither is Marvel Snap. That is such a powerful interaction that it crashes the game, but when we load it up, we'll see that Bar Sinister does not trigger for Dracula. We're not allowed to add additional cards there. Professor stops Bar Sinister, and it also stops effects like Lockjaw from adding new cards into the location. So I thought that was a pretty fun thing to look at, as well as a pretty devastating thing for us, but actually, it's not bad to just have one Dracula. One Dracula can still easily win that location, so I feel like that would be good. Oh, I wonder how just Professor. If you probably play one Professor into Bar, it won't triple itself or quadruple itself, so that's kind of funny. My opponent plays a White Queen, so they are going to grab Apocalypse, but luckily they had priority. So they're going to grab Apocalypse here before we are able to pump it up, and they're not going to be able to do too much with a 8-power Apocalypse for 6. So I'm feeling pretty good about what we're putting together here. And then I'm going to do a Swarm here. I think I could see going either way with this. Like, do you want to Swarm, which gives it an additional power in Muir Island, which is good. And the other thing that this does is it allows me to completely clear my hand. So now next turn I get to play Chavez into Project Pegasus, and I'll guarantee discard Apocalypse through Dracula. So that's what we're going for. My opponent's going to Devil Dinosaur, and they are technically winning in Muir Island, though in order to win Project Pegasus, they'll have to play a card, at which point their Devil Dinosaur will shrink below Muir Island, and Apocalypse will win us Bar Sinister through Dracula. So a really sweet one, another one with Project Pegasus, and a Bar Sinister that we totally got thwarted in, but we still had enough power to grab a victory here. And I think this one's a retreat from my opponent, as they realize writing is on the wall with Apocalypse being able to beat them out in the bar. So pretty funny one, I thought. Despite, again, those locations not really doing too much work for us, we were able to find a way to make it work. Okay, here's a Mindscape game. Also brought this one up yesterday. Mindscape is terrible when you are playing discard, and we already have Apocalypse and Swarm, so we're going to be giving my opponent some really big cards. My opponent plays a Quinjet into the Mindscape. Oh, okay, this is this one. Okay, this one is silly. We've got Blade here, and I'm going to throw Blade into Mindscape as well. We see that that second location is the Space Throne. And then I guess I wind up just playing Swarm out because I don't want to discard Swarm and give a bunch of Swarms to my opponent, especially with Space Throne kind of constricting the space on the board. But location number 3 is going to be the Bifrost, which means we've actually just won the Space Throne because everything's going to move over one and Swarm beats Quinjet. My opponent then snaps, and I'm thinking, I don't think they realize what's going on here yet. So I'm not going to snap back because Mindscape is still not great for us. But we are going to win the Space Throne in a sneaky way, and my opponent plays Green Goblin into the Space Throne, which definitely shows that they don't know what's about to happen. Everything's about to move over. We are going to probably sacrifice the Bifrost, and then we're just going to try to win over in Mindscape instead. So I think this turn I will throw Colleen Wing over into Mindscape. No risk here of discarding Apocalypse, so that's nice. Then I'm going to snap back and see if my opponent figures it out. Now, I still don't love my chances of winning this game, but we are going to win the Space Throne, and snapping here puts some nice pressure on my opponent to make them think about what's going on a little bit more and ultimately cause them to retreat. So that's one way to get around Mindscape, is just, well, do some other silly things, but snap back later on and bluff a little bit so that way your opponent bails out of the game. And I think we're going to see that in just a second here. Yeah, that's always an awkward part. I don't know, with stringing all these videos together, I don't know how long before my opponents will concede in that, but I think that's going to come down, yeah, real quickly towards the end of that timer there. Okay, well, we got a win in Mindscape. Wasn't expecting that, but that's nice. On to the next one, and we've got Blade, Lady Sif, Colleen Wing, and Apocalypse, plus a pair of Raptors. Okay, I don't quite remember this one or where it's going, but I think I might have an idea. I think we're going to find a fun location on turn 2, if I remember correctly. Ooh, my opponent with Bast on turn 1. That's kind of fun. And turn 2, we're going to see District X. So this is one of the bonus games I said. We're looking at top 10 games plus 2 bonus ones in there. And yeah, so this isn't really getting to show the full power of the discard deck, but we are going to just get to see some of the fun cards that this deck has access to. And now on this turn, I'm going to fully battle my opponent for Super Flow, playing Lady Sif and moving the Blade over, with the idea being now we can totally deny them Adam Warlock and thus take away a lot of their confidence. Oh, and I actually decide not to even play Lady Sif and instead just skip. That way we can play a She-Hulk on our next turn, whereas otherwise we would have taken a 50-50 and potentially discarded the She-Hulk. I thought this was a lot safer, and now we are definitely going to be winning in the Super Flow. So that's really nice. My opponent's Scarlet Witches, that gives us Lechugia, but they are no longer going to be drawing other cards, and then we've got a really sweet turn on turn 5 here. We get to Lady Sif to pump up our Apocalypse, and then Electra to take out Bast over in the Super Flow. We could also use it to take out a Raptor, though I think I'm just going to ignore the Savage Land and instead play into Lechugia this turn after thinking about it for a second. I do start with Lady Sif in Savage Land, but they're already beating us there. They're beating us in Lechugia as well, but not by as much. So I think that this will be a nice play to shore up the rest of the game. My opponent does play into Savage Land. They play a Gamora, so we savagely avoided that Gamora, and now we are winning in the other 2 locations. And we're going to be playing a 12 power Apocalypse this turn, so that's going to be tough for my opponent to beat in a District X game, and they're going to go ahead and throw in the towel, I believe, in just a moment here. So let's jump ahead to the next one. I should just be doing this and jumping ahead to the opponent retreated and victory screen. We're halfway through the games that I'm showcasing today, so I figured now is a great time to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you have not already. I put out daily Marvel Snap videos, and typically a little bit in short form videos. I'll put out like 1 game a day, though in this one we're looking at 10 plus 2 bonus games because I had a bunch of content to showcase with Dracula. This is almost like a Dracula primer for anybody who might be interested in the deck. We're looking at a variety of different locations, and now it's time to look at some more locations that are bad with this deck, and that's going to be Bar with No Name, which this deck has no way to interact with. Any type of like Sanctum, where like you're not allowed to play cards there, this deck isn't great with. But my opponent plays the Hood into Hell's Kitchen, which might not seem like a lot, but it's actually huge for us. Also, Moon Knight discards Carnage, which is pretty cool. But why that's big is the Hood could have actually won Bar with No Name for my opponent. They just didn't realize it. So small mistake on their part there. We're just going to try to put as much power as possible into these other locations and then try to win the game on differential by having more total power. So that's the plan here. Yondu is going to destroy America Chavez, and then Deathlock is going to destroy all of my opponent's cards in Hell's Kitchen. So they've got a little bit of a lead there for now, but I think we'll be able to get some of that lead back. Morbius is going to get really big as we dump a bunch of discard cards into the compound here, and I'm going to hang on to Swarm. It's a little bit awkward, especially when we don't have that much space, but at the very least the Swarms are going to be cards that I can discard and that are then going to grow the Morbius. But eventually Dracula is going to wind up discarding a Swarm at the end of the game, and we find Apocalypse there, so that is just locked into the compound as well, though that does add some nice power to the location, and this is going to be all based off of differential. Colleen Wing gives us a few more Swarms even, and while it doesn't look like much, we are currently winning. We're up by 2. 2, though we're actually losing by 2 because my opponent has a Mysterio in the third lane, so that's something to pay attention to. And then we're going to play 5 power into Blade, 3 power from Swarm, and then 5 power from Dracula. But we can see my opponent actually played an arrow into Bar with No Name, which saves us because now we win Bar with No Name, which I was not planning on doing, and instead we've got a tie in Hell's Kitchen. If my opponent had just played that arrow normally, they would have had more total power and they would have beaten us. So that was a rare one where not having a super great draw actually worked out pretty well for me, and I just thought that was a funny one to include in all of this. Next up, we've got Dracula Swordmaster Moon Knight, and looking like a Mojo World game, which can be good. We can fill that with Swarm, so I don't hate Mojo World as a location in general. And then location number 2 is Throne Room, which I do like. I think that I actually played this deck a fair amount while Throne Room was the featured location, and it can do pretty well there. You just drop a Dracula, your opponent doesn't really know how to prepare for that. Asgard can also be a cool location for this deck. So 3 good locations. It's making me feel pretty good about our chances, but basically we can battle for Asgard with some of our overstated cards to start off the game. My opponent's going to play Ebony Maw, which I think is still quite good for us. I'm going to take turn 4. I think just to, okay, interesting. There's 2 options there. We can play Lockjaw plus Blade into Asgard or into Mojo World, or we could just play Dracula into the Throne Room. And as you saw in one of my games yesterday, you do run the slight risk of discarding Dracula once you play it from, once you start playing cards into Lockjaw, those discard cards. So a lot of different options to play for, but ultimately, I'm just going to go for this. I'm fully going to not worry about the cards that I have in my hand, because even though I call this deck Draculac, this deck is all about Swarm and Apocalypse. So I'm going to try to win in Asgard, and we'll have a pretty good chance to do so. And then I'm just going to discard some of these cooler cards that are in my hand and hope to draw 2 more cards out of my deck with a guaranteed draw there because we were adding 7 power to the location. So now we've won in Asgard, and we only have to win one of these other 2 locations. I'm going to throw Hell Cow into the flooded location, and hopefully that could pump up Apocalypse a little bit and set us up well for next turn. But it's even better than that, as my opponent declines to play into the flooded location, so Hell Cow actually just wins the flooded location. And then of course Apocalypse is also going to be pretty beefy into the Throne Room in case my opponent was thinking of playing anything sneaky on that final turn. But now we're winning both of the locations that my opponent can't play into, and we're going to be able to add a bunch of stuff into the Throne Room. There is some consideration for like still Swarm into Asgard in case they play like Mr. Fantastic or Spectrum. I don't know what my opponent has quite got going on here. Maybe it's a Blue Marvel deck or something. But either way, we're going to have enough power to win all 3 locations. So my opponent is going to retreat on the final turn. Pretty basic stuff there from them. And then in this game, we've got Blade, Lockjaw, and Moon Knight, plus another Throne Room game. Like I said, I do think that this deck was pretty good when Throne Room was a featured location, and I did bring that up at the time in one of my Throne Room videos, and I'll post new videos as we go along and check out the new featured locations in this season, so feel free to come check me out for those as well. Always trying to, I know I had a lot of subscribers the other day when I did that Bar Sinister video, but yeah, I'm always trying to take as much advantage of the featured locations as possible, because that is a ton of fun. Sokovia is basically like a Moon Knight, makes myself and my opponent discard a card, and then we both play a Lockjaw into Sokovia. I'm going to throw a Morbius out there, and then I think just Blade into the Lockjaw location, or maybe I'll even hang off and keep that Blade in my hand. That way next turn I can play Hell Cow plus Blade and not have to worry about discarding Blade from or discarding Hellcow rather from the blade, because that could be a little bit awkward for us, so I don't want to do that. There's actually another option here too, which is I could throw the rock into the Lockjaw location, but I'd rather just play the blade and discard the rock. And hopefully we don't hit too many rocks off Lockjaw. My opponent is going to Rockjaw away a rock and grab a wasp. So not too much more power in there for them, but we are mostly building up this Morbius. We're going to hit a rock ourselves, which is unfortunate, and then we are going to discard Apocalypse yet again. And honestly, I don't love what we're currently doing, but Hellcow is going to discard Apocalypse once more. That'll put us up to 8 power. And we're still like a little bit behind in Sokovia, so this is a little bit awkward, and we draw Chavez for the turn, so we're going to be able to win Throne Room. And actually the trick here is that Morbius is big enough that we could have won Subterranea, though it would have tied with Magneto. But here's the problem. My opponent plays a Magneto, and then Lockjaw eats my Apocalypse. So yeah, this is kind of a low light game. We were, I thought, in a really good space to win, but unfortunately my opponent had that Magneto tech for the Lockjaw and was able to sneak a really sweet victory there in those final moments. So fun stuff there regardless of the outcome. I thought this was a sweet one to showcase. And in this one, feeling good enough that I'm going to go ahead and snap a Rooney on turn 1. Cloning Vats plus a lot of cheap cards for the deck that I'd really like to see. And there's a lot of cool stuff that this deck can do with Cloning Vats. You could even go Lockjaw plus free swarms and then do it all again next turn. That can be a lot of fun as all of those cards return to your hand, but I'm just going to Morbid up, and then next turn we'll have 3 energy and I'll be able to play Morbius and Blade and really start to do some powerful things. Location number 3 is going to be Wakandan Embassy, so that works out nicely for us because everything is even bigger. And I'm going to throw down the Lockjaw this turn, main reason being that I don't want to discard the Lockjaw to the Blade. So that works out nicely. And now we do have a Cosmo for my opponent, so Cloning Vats isn't going to be super great for us, though it does mean we could just throw Blade in there and not have it discard anything, which is kind of cute. But basically, I'm trying to avoid the Cosmo, and I do think there's a good chance my opponent's going to play Cosmo into the Lockjaw location on this turn, especially with that snap. So I'm just going to try to avoid that entirely. And I think that means playing Blade either just as a card in the Cloning Vats, and then we can decide what we want to do with it next turn, or just playing it in Atlantis. And ultimately, I decide I'm just going to play Blade, add 5 power there, and then return it to my hand, and then I'll make the decision next turn on what to do with it. My opponent playing another Ant-Man, so that'll get to clog up the Cloning Vats, and we're going to grab another Morbius. So now we can go, well, we've got a lot of options once we drop this Dracula, though we don't have the Apocalypse to go along with the Dracula, so that does kind of decrease its power a little bit, and I'm instead going to decide to just go Blade plus Hellcow into Atlantis and try to add some more power there that way. And now next turn, we're going to be drawing America Chavez, and we should have some pretty big Morbiuses, plus we could even swarm into the Wakandan Embassy. Blade is going to discard another Morbius from us, so that part's a little bit awkward, and then Hellcow gets rid of Dracula, which is good, and Swarm, which is great. So now we are actually tied up in the Cloning Vats, so that's really good. And we can add a lot of power to the board this turn. We can go Moon Knight plus Swordmaster, discarding a bunch of cards. We only have to discard one card to win in the Cloning Vats. I do want to make sure that I am still playing around the potential of my opponent playing a Spectrum. But this game gets a little bit awkward because if we play another card into Cloning Vats, my opponent's going to get +6 from Mojo. So we've got a little bit of a puzzle to figure out here, and I think I will actually decide to only play one swarm or not even play these swarms at all. So that way, we always have cards to discard, and we can even beat a Spectrum going into Cloning Vats. That Spectrum would go in Atlantis, so the idea here is that we're going to win in Atlantis, and we're going to win in Cloning Vats as we give both of our Morbs +4/+4. My opponent plays a Mr. Fantastic, so I'm definitely glad that I played to at least add a little bit of power to the Cloning Vats this turn. And then another Ant-Man means that they've got a lot of power in Atlantis, but it's not quite going to be enough as our discard cards are just a little bit too big, and we are able to take Cloning Vats, and then we're almost able to even win in the Wakandan Embassy if we were to hit Apocalypse there. So that would have been funny to grab a Cosmic Victory, but still, an 8-cube victory, I will take it. I think I've got one more game here to showcase. Let's take a look. No, I've got one more after this one as well. So this one is a bonus one, and we have got a squirrel game, a lot of emotes going back and forth, and then it is going to wind up being an ego game. So I'm going to go ahead and snap, and hopefully, yeah, my opponent goes ahead and snaps as well, so I hit them with the thumbs up emote. This is what you gotta do if you see ego. You gotta snap and you gotta play it out. One of you will win 8 cubes, the other one will walk away humiliated as ego does not love you. But we swarm, which is like a pretty terrible play to start things off. But then we're going to Morb, which I do like the ability to Morb here. And next turn, hopefully we play Hell Cow, and that could work out well for us. And we do have Throne Room, so that's a nice location to play into too. If we can just play anything there, it will have the most power. We do get to play the Hell Cow this turn, so hopefully that takes away some of Ego's options so that he is less confused for this final turn. My opponent plays Demon, then Killmonger, super awkward order, and destroys all of their cards, leaving them with just the Killmonger and the Carnage. So we're going to be basically winning in every location and then actually winning once we discard 2 cards. We didn't wind up discarding Apocalypse, but we do play Dracula to potentially discard it this turn. 50-50 doesn't matter as they play into Throne Room. Wait, it does matter. No, it doesn't matter again, because either way we win the other 2 locations, even with... Oh, there's still one more turn? Oh, I got totally confused here that we still have another turn going on. So I'm going to play a Lockjaw and a Colleen Wing, I suppose, and then we will make a huge Apocalypse. So we might lose now in the center location from Ego, but we are definitely going to be able to win in that Throne Room. Wait a minute, Magneto! Moving some stuff around. Okay, well, we definitely win in the Ego location then. Really silly game, but ultimately a pretty fun one, and we get to walk away with 8 cubes. So that's another bonus game that I threw in here. But now game number 10 to wrap on the video. Wrap up the video. Sorry, I've been going for a while right now, forgetting just English idioms. Is that an idiom, to wrap up? I think that's an idiom. It's like a weird phrase that doesn't mean what it's supposed to mean. Let me know. And feel free to drop some idioms in the comments down below. I don't know what I'm going for here, just going for some type of engagement, but that'll let me know that you watched all the way through. You saw all 10 games plus the bonus games. This one's going to be a sweet one. I've actually already looked at Camartage plus Dracula in the past, but it is just a really sweet pair, and I also really loved what my opponent did this game with Iron Fist into Camartage to double move that Vulture. That's really cool. We're going to wind up throwing a Lady Sif there to double discard Apocalypse, and then we get Wakandan Embassy to give our cards even more power. And from here, I'll play Dracula into the sewer system. That seems pretty good. And then next turn, probably go Hell Cow plus Blade to discard a bunch, unless I can find like Swarm. Then maybe that'll change up my plays a little bit. My opponent's going to Doctor Strange and bring the Vulture over, but you know what? We've got Camartage. So I think I am going to do something a little bit different here, and we do draw the Swarm, which is actually really important to note. I have to decide how much I don't want to overdraw with some of these cards here. But after thinking about it for just a second here, I realized that we can double Moon Knight my opponent and make them discard 2 cards. One thing that I really love in this deck is Moon Knight hitting those key cards, knowing, importantly, what you no longer have to play around can be really good, but a double Moon Knight from Taj can just be devastating. I think we looked at that yesterday as well off of something, or maybe that was a Lockjaw Moon Knight, but either way, we're going to see that again here, and Moon Knight's going to discard a Swarm. That's right, Colleen Wing first discarded Blade, and then for my opponent, Moon Knight is going to discard Heimdall, which takes away a lot of the power that the movement deck has, because now they're probably stuck with these cards exactly as they are on the board. So we're looking pretty good, though Cloak does mean that my opponent can move Vulture into the sewer system and battle for that location. So this is my first thought, to just play my cards like this, but I realize just how much power they're going to have in the sewer system. And these Swarms aren't good in the sewer system either, because they only add 2 power, getting that -1. So what I'm going to do is instead put everything into the sewer system. I'm going to draw Chavez back to my hand first, but then I will play her over there. Then I'm going to move over Moon Knight and Colleen Wing, and I'm going to swarm up over into Taj, and I think I do make one last final change before... No, okay, I go with this. I'm playing nothing into the Wakandan Embassy, and I'm glad I did, because my opponent committed there, so we totally dodge in that location. We're going to win easy in Taj, but it's all going to come down to the sewer system. Are we going to have enough to win over there? My opponent goes up to 34 in the sewer system, but with that discard of Apocalypse, we are going to go up to 36 and find the win. So there you go, a really, really clutch one. Every single point mattered over into the sewer system. So really close game, and hopefully you guys had fun with this. This was a lot to put together, but I was playing a lot of Marvel Snap at the end of the season and wanted to find some way to turn that into content. New season just started today, so I'm sure that's pretty sweet. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about with that, and we're going to take a look at some featured locations tomorrow. I believe it is going to be Baxter Building, so we'll come up with some cool decks for the Baxter Building. Not exactly sure how to take on that location. Or wait, no, it's not going to be Baxter Building tomorrow. It's going to be Baxter Building on Sunday. Tomorrow, we're going to have a brand new featured location. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you are not already, and that is going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'm No Lux Given. Peace.